What if I told you that the teachings of Jesus that most people know today are only fragments of a far greater truth, pieces of a puzzle deliberately hidden, edited, or silenced for centuries? That behind the familiar stories lies a secret wisdom so powerful it could shatter the illusions we've been conditioned to accept about life, death, and the true nature of the soul. These aren't the teachings you hear in Sunday sermons or read in neatly packaged translations. No, these are the forbidden teachings, the ones buried beneath layers of dogma, hidden in suppressed texts, and whispered about by mystics who risked their lives to preserve them. Teachings that unveil a different Jesus, not merely a preacher of morality, but a master of consciousness, a revealer of inner kingdoms, and a guide to divine self-realization. For 2,000 years, institutions have claimed ownership of his message, filtering it, sanitizing it, making it safe for the masses. But what happens when we peel back those layers? What happens when we dare to look into the shadows of history, to rediscover the words and ideas that threatened empires and overturned spiritual hierarchies? In this journey, we will enter that forgotten realm. We'll explore the mysterious texts banned from the biblical canon, such as the Gospel of Thomas and the Gospel of Mary. We'll uncover Jesus' profound insights on the kingdom within, a realm not confined to stone temples or rigid rituals, but found in the awakened depths of human consciousness. We'll examine why these teachings were seen as dangerous and why, if truly understood, they could transform the way we live, love, and experience the divine. This is not just a story of history. It is a story of power, of hidden truths, and of liberation. Because the forbidden teachings of Jesus are not simply about religion. They are about remembering who we really are. So prepare yourself. This is not the Jesus of stained glass windows and quiet chapels. This is the Jesus whose words burn like fire and awaken the sleeping spirit. And once you hear them, you may never see the world, or yourself, the same way again. To understand why the forbidden teachings of Jesus remain hidden, we must first step back into the world he inhabited, a world brimming with mystery, conflict, and competing visions of truth. The man we know as Jesus was born into an age of occupation and unrest. Judea was under Roman rule, its people weary from oppression, yearning for deliverance. The spiritual atmosphere was equally turbulent. The Jewish faith itself was fractured into sects: Pharisees, Sadducees, Essenes, Zealots, each clinging to its own interpretation of divine law. Yet outside these boundaries lay an even broader world: the mysticism of Egypt, the wisdom of Persia, the philosophies of Greece, and the ancient traditions of Mesopotamia. In such a climate, Jesus' message did not arise in isolation. It was shaped in dialogue with currents of wisdom far older than his time. This is why many scholars believe that Jesus' sayings, especially those found in the apocryphal texts, echo with striking similarity to teachings from Eastern traditions. Phrases such as "the kingdom of God is within you" resonate with Hindu and Buddhist notions of inner awakening. His emphasis on union with the divine mirrors the mystical experiences described by sages and initiates across civilizations. It is here that we begin to glimpse a Jesus not as a figure confined to one religion, but as a universal teacher of consciousness. But history tells us that power fears liberation. After his death, the raw, unfiltered essence of Jesus' wisdom spread rapidly through small communities, Gnostic groups, mystics, seekers, each treasuring different fragments of his message. Some focused on inner gnosis, or direct knowledge of the divine spark within. Others emphasized equality between men and women, as seen in the Gospel of Mary, where Mary Magdalene is portrayed not as a repentant sinner, but as a true disciple, entrusted with secret revelations. These teachings, however, stood in stark contrast to the emerging orthodoxy. By the 4th century, when Christianity was embraced by the Roman Empire, the need for control outweighed the quest for truth. Councils were convened, texts were chosen, others destroyed. The result was a canon designed not to liberate the human soul, but to unify an empire under a single narrative. The mystical sayings of Jesus were dismissed as heresy. The Gnostic Gospels were banned, their followers persecuted, their wisdom forced underground. Yet fragments survived, buried in desert caves, hidden in monasteries, preserved in whispers among mystics. When the Dead Sea Scrolls and the Nag Hammadi Library resurfaced in the 20th century, they revealed glimpses of a forgotten Jesus, one who did not demand blind faith, but invited inner transformation. Philosophically, this forbidden wisdom shifts the very foundation of spirituality. It suggests that divinity is not distant, not reserved for priests or temples, but alive within every human being. It dismantles the notion of separation between God and creation, offering instead a vision of unity, that the spark of the infinite burns in every soul. And it is precisely this idea, that you are not powerless, that heaven is not somewhere far away, but here and now within, that threatened empires, priesthoods, and power structures for centuries. Because a humanity that knows its own divinity is a humanity that cannot be controlled. This is the stage upon which the forbidden teachings unfold, a clash between truth and authority, between liberation and control. And in the midst of this conflict stands Jesus, not as a symbol of dogma, but as a revealer of mysteries too dangerous for the world to keep. When we strip away the layers of dogma and institutional filters, what emerges from the forbidden teachings of Jesus is both startling and profoundly liberating. His words, preserved in texts like the Gospel of Thomas, strike like lightning, short, piercing, and charged with paradoxical wisdom. Unlike the carefully structured narratives of the canonical Gospels, these sayings are more like riddles, koans, or sparks designed to ignite the soul into awakening. One of the most striking is this: if those who lead you say to you, "See, the kingdom is in the sky," then the birds of the sky will precede you. If they say to you, "It is in the sea," then the fish will precede you. Rather, the kingdom is within you and it is outside of you. This teaching dismantles the externalization of divinity. It challenges the belief that heaven is some far-off reward, or that access to God requires mediation through temple, priest, or institution. Instead, it reveals the radical truth that the kingdom, the eternal dimension of the divine, is already present, both within and around us, waiting to be recognized. Why then was this dangerous? Because if every human being carries the divine spark within, no hierarchy, no empire, no religious authority can claim exclusive access to God. The gatekeepers lose their power when people awaken to their own direct connection to the infinite. Another forbidden theme centers on self-knowledge. Jesus is recorded as saying, "When you know yourselves, then you will be known, and you will understand that you are children of the living Father. But if you do not know yourselves, then you live in poverty, and you are that poverty." This is a profound reversal of the traditional view of salvation. It is not about outward rituals or strict adherence to laws. It is about inner recognition. To know yourself, in this sense, is not simply psychological awareness. It is mystical remembrance. It is awakening to the truth that your deepest essence is divine. Such teachings echo across traditions. The Delphic oracle of Greece inscribed, "Know thyself." The Hindu Upanishads declare, "Tat tvam asi," thou art that. In Buddhism, enlightenment is awakening to one's true nature. Jesus' words, far from being isolated, belong to this great current of perennial wisdom, a wisdom that calls human beings to pierce through illusion and awaken to their eternal essence. But the forbidden teachings did not stop there. Jesus often spoke in paradoxes, pushing his listeners beyond ordinary thinking. In the Gospel of Thomas, he says, "When you make the two into one, when you make the inner like the outer and the outer like the inner, and the above like the below, then you will enter the kingdom." This is alchemical language, language of unification. The divided mind must become whole, the illusion of separation dissolved. It is the reconciliation of opposites, spirit and matter, light and darkness, male and female. This was not abstract poetry, it was a map for transformation. To make the two one is to transcend duality, to awaken to the oneness underlying all existence. The danger of such a teaching lies in its power. Duality sustains systems of control, us versus them, saved versus damned, priest versus layman. But unity dismantles those walls. It empowers individuals to step into direct communion with the divine without intermediaries. And then there is perhaps the most radical of all, the teaching of divine identity. In the Gospel of John, though preserved in the canon, there lingers a trace of this dangerous idea. Jesus declares, "You are gods." The institutions have long softened or ignored this statement, but in the context of the forbidden texts, its meaning explodes. The essence of his teaching was not worshiping him as an unattainable figure, but realizing the same divine essence within ourselves. He was a mirror, a living example of what we all could become if we awakened fully. Here we begin to see why these teachings were branded heresy. A religion built on control thrives on dependence, on the idea that salvation lies outside of you, mediated through rituals and institutions. But Jesus' forbidden wisdom spoke of sovereignty, of direct communion, of the divine light hidden in every human heart. It is this radical call to awakening, to realize heaven here and now, within and without, that forms the first layer of the forbidden teachings. And it is only the beginning. If the first layer of Jesus' forbidden teachings calls us to awaken to the kingdom within, the second layer challenges the very framework of how we understand reality, power, and even death itself. One of the most striking insights preserved in the Gospel of Thomas is this: if you bring forth what is within you, what you bring forth will save you. If you do not bring forth what is within you, what you do not bring forth will destroy you. Here Jesus is not speaking of sin in the conventional sense, but of potential, of the divine spark hidden within. Every soul carries a seed of light, a fragment of the eternal. To bring it forth means to awaken it, to live in alignment with the truth of one's divine nature. But to suppress it, to live blindly, is to be consumed by ignorance, fear, and suffering. In this teaching, salvation is not an external rescue, it is an inner unfolding. This completely overturns the institutional message of dependence. Instead of waiting for redemption from outside, Jesus points to the responsibility and power within each individual. It is a call to self-realization, a mystical invitation to discover the Christ within. Another forbidden insight relates to the mystery of death. In the canonical Gospels, resurrection is framed as a miraculous event unique to Jesus. But in the hidden teachings, resurrection is revealed as a universal process, one that begins in this life. The Gospel of Philip declares, "Those who say they will die first and then rise are mistaken. If they do not first receive the resurrection while they live, when they die they will receive nothing." This reframes resurrection not as a distant miracle, but as awakening from spiritual sleep, an inner rebirth while still in the flesh. To die before you die, as the mystics say, is to transcend the ego, to awaken to the eternal self that cannot perish. Such a teaching removes the fear of death, undermining one of the greatest tools of control used by religion and empire. A people unafraid of death cannot be manipulated through fear. The forbidden teachings also carried radical implications for human relationships and spiritual authority. In the Gospel of Mary, we encounter a startling vision. Mary Magdalene is portrayed as the disciple who understood Jesus most deeply, receiving hidden revelations directly from him. When Peter and others challenge her authority, she responds with clarity and courage, insisting that true discipleship comes not from gender, status, or hierarchy, but from inner vision. If embraced, this would have shattered the patriarchal structure of the early church. Equality between men and women, recognition of direct spiritual knowledge, and the authority of personal revelation were all dangerous to a system that thrived on centralized control. No wonder such texts were suppressed. Yet perhaps the most profound forbidden insight is hidden in paradoxical sayings like this: "Blessed is the one who stands at the beginning, and they will know the end and not taste death." What could this mean? At its heart, it suggests that the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end, are not separate. The eternal is present now. To stand at the beginning is to return to pure awareness, to the origin point of consciousness, where time and death lose their grip. To live from that awareness is to transcend fear, to experience life as an unbroken flow of divine presence. Such teachings dissolve the illusion of separation between God and man, life and death, heaven and earth. They reveal a Jesus who was not simply pointing to himself, but to the hidden truth within every human being. His message was not about worshiping him as an idol, but about becoming what he was, an awakened being, a living vessel of divine light. This is why his words were too dangerous for the powerful to preserve in full. To admit that every soul is divine, that resurrection is available here and now, that no institution can stand between you and God. This would dismantle the very foundations of empire and church alike. And so the forbidden teachings were buried, dismissed as heresy, and left to slumber beneath sands and shadows. But they could not be erased. For truth, once spoken, never dies, it waits. And now, as humanity awakens once again, these teachings resurface, calling us back to the hidden kingdom. It is one thing to marvel at hidden gospels and ancient revelations, but their true power lies not in speculation, but in practice. The forbidden teachings of Jesus were never meant to be locked in stone. They were maps for the soul, blueprints for awakening. And if we dare to apply them, they can transform the way we see ourselves, the way we live, and the way we move through this world. Let us return to one of the central truths. The kingdom of God is within you. To live this teaching requires a shift of perception. Most of us spend our lives chasing fulfillment in the external, success, approval, wealth, or even religious promises of a future paradise. But Jesus' forbidden wisdom tells us that heaven is not a distant goal. It is a state of awareness available here and now. The practice, then, is to turn inward. Begin by cultivating silence each day, through meditation, contemplation, or simple stillness. In the quiet, you start to sense that the source of peace and joy is not out there, but within. This was the secret of the mystics, the hidden art of communion without temple or priest. Every breath becomes prayer, every moment sacred. Another key application is the teaching of self-knowledge. Jesus said, "When you know yourselves, then you will be known." To know yourself is not merely to list your personality traits or preferences. It is to peel back the layers of conditioning, fear, and illusion, and glimpse the divine essence at your core. Practically, this means observing yourself honestly. Notice your patterns of thought, your automatic reactions, the masks you wear. Then ask, who am I beneath these roles? Who am I when the noise of the world falls silent? This questioning is not academic, it is experiential. It draws you deeper into the still point of being, where the answer reveals itself not as words, but as a living presence. The forbidden teachings also call us to unity, to make the two into one. In practical terms, this means healing the divisions within ourselves. Many of us live torn between opposites, desire and fear, light and shadow, spirit and body. The mystical path is not about rejecting one side, but integrating both into wholeness. Begin by embracing your shadow. Instead of denying your fears, wounds, or desires, bring them into the light of awareness. See them not as enemies, but as parts of yourself longing for healing. The paradox is that when you stop fighting your inner darkness, it transforms. Unity is born, and from that unity, a profound sense of peace arises. Another powerful application lies in the teaching of resurrection here and now. To die before you die is to let go of the ego's tight grip, the endless need for validation, control, and separation. Daily life gives us endless opportunities for this practice. When pride demands the last word, let it die. When fear insists on clinging, release it. Each small surrender is a death to the false self and a birth into freedom. And perhaps most radical of all, the forbidden teaching of divine identity. You are God's. To live this truth is not to indulge in arrogance, but to recognize sacredness in yourself and others. It changes how you walk through the world. You begin to see every person, not as stranger, enemy, or obstacle, but as a bearer of the same divine spark. Compassion arises naturally. Love ceases to be commandment and becomes vision. This practice can be lived even in the simplest acts. When you look into someone's eyes, see beyond the surface, see the infinite gazing back. When you face challenges, remember, The same power that moved through Jesus moves through you. The divine is not distant. It breathes in your lungs, beats in your heart, thinks through your mind. These practices do not require temples, rituals, or intermediaries. They require courage, the courage to turn inward, to embrace truth, to live as if the kingdom is already here. For that is the essence of the forbidden teachings. Not escape, but transformation. Not blind faith, but direct experience. If you begin, even in small ways, to live these truths, you will notice a shift. Fear loosens. Clarity grows. The world no longer feels like a prison, but a mirror of the divine. And in that realization, you step into the very path that was once hidden, the path of the awakened soul. The story of the forbidden teachings of Jesus is not merely about lost texts or suppressed gospels. It is about a vision of humanity that is far more radiant, far more powerful than we have been led to believe. For centuries, empires and institutions told us that salvation lies outside ourselves, that we are broken, powerless, dependent. But hidden within the sands of Egypt, whispered in secret by mystics, preserved in fragments of parchment and memory, a different message survived. It is the message that the kingdom of heaven is not locked away in some distant future, but alive within you now. That to know yourself is to know the divine. That resurrection is not an event to await after death, but a living transformation you can experience in this very breath. And that each of us carries a spark of the infinite, an eternal flame that cannot be extinguished. This vision is not safe. It was never meant to be. For if you awaken to your divine essence, the chains of fear and control fall away. You no longer need permission to touch the sacred. You no longer live as a subject in someone else's empire. You live as a sovereign of your own soul. And that, above all, is why these teachings were buried. But here is the truth. Wisdom cannot be destroyed. Fire can burn scrolls, but not the light they contain. Empires can silence voices, but not the resonance of truth that echoes across centuries. And now, in our time, as humanity searches for deeper meaning amidst chaos, these forbidden teachings rise again, like seeds breaking through soil after a long winter. The real question is not whether they were hidden or why. The real question is this: what will you do with them now? Will you continue to look outside yourself for salvation, for authority, for approval? Or will you dare to turn inward, to discover the kingdom within? Will you cling to fear, or will you walk the path of resurrection here and now, letting the false self fall away so that the eternal self may rise? The choice is yours. It always has been. Jesus' forbidden teachings are not a set of doctrines to memorize, but a call to awaken. They invite you to live with eyes open, heart open, soul alive. To see the divine not as a distant ruler, but as the very life force pulsing within you and all of creation. To embrace unity where the world insists on division. To walk not in blind faith, but in direct experience of truth. And if you take even one step on this path, if you dare to live as though heaven is here, as though you are more than flesh and bone, as though eternity breathes through you, then you will begin to understand why these teachings were hidden. Not because they were false, but because they were too true, too liberating, too dangerous to those who profit from your sleep. So let the words not remain mere echoes from the past. Let them ignite something within you. Let them remind you that you are more than you've been told, more than you've dared to believe. The kingdom is within you. The spark is alive. The time to awaken is now.